Some great questions at a critical time for VR. In our next session, Ted Schilowitz has been exploring new forms of entertainment for the past 3 years in his role as futurist at 20th Century Fox. Today, he will sit down with Will Mason, co-founder and editor-in-chief of leading VR publication UploadVR, to talk on some of the discoveries and learnings of VR, AR, and immersive bricks and mortar cinema experiences. Please join me in welcoming Ted and Will to the stage.
Thank you.
Thanks. Brought us a little droid.
Yeah. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hi, everyone.
So we only have like 20 minutes here, so I'm just going to dive right on into it.
Go for it.
So, Ted, as the
Before you start, he said, do you want to look at the questions beforehand? I said, no. I don't want to know. I just want you to throw them out and see what happens.
There we go. It's going to be fun. So as the futurist at Fox, you're responsible for keeping the company up to date with, all the latest and greatest in tech. So what are some of the things that you're doing right now to take 20th Century Fox into the 21st century?
It's a great starting question. I would say the first thing is the word responsible is a bit of a misguided sort of approach. It's actually more who's the one who's a little irresponsible? Who's the one who's thinking about things that really touch the what if, the maybe this might happen, and knowing that you have to explore and you have to find your way, and those that do things and activate on things and try things are going to be in a better shape and a better dynamic than those that wait on the sidelines. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that we know what we're doing or have it all right. So when people ask me sort of what kind of job is a futurist, I say basically I'm a glorified lab rat. I try and run around the maze and figure things out and involve myself in communities and groups like this, connect up with groups like Upload, and learn things. And that's sort of the point of it all. And what's interesting from a 20th Century Fox standpoint is they've given me a pretty wide breadth to do it. They asked me when I retired from a movie camera company that I helped sort of create this movie camera company called Red, which is a very popular movie camera. And I retired from that 3 years back, and they said, come be the futurist at the movie studio. I'm like, well, what kind of job is that? And they said, well, that's what you'll figure out. Try and guide us a little bit. Help us to see what might be out there that we should be paying attention to, and at some point, we should be doing. And that's what we've been doing.
Cool. So, I mean, one of the first things you did there was help craft a VR experience around The Martian. And by all accounts, it wasn't any sort of a small endeavor.
Yeah.
There's a number of other studios that have tried to create VR projects to tie into their films, but you guys went all out with that first piece, did interactivity, etc. So what led you to committing so much to that first piece? What was it about it?
Yeah, it was actually the first piece that led into the second piece that then created that level of commitment. So the very first piece was a piece centered around a Searchlight movie called Wild, which is the Reese Witherspoon, Laura Dern movie, which was a big hit for Searchlight. And the way that our sort of ragtag team at Fox started to assemble it was myself, the guy who brought me into the fold, the president of post-production, a guy named Ted Galliano, and I guess, executive VP at Searchlight, David Greenbaum. He was working on the movie Wild, and we thought, we were watching what was happening in now the early stages of the fourth rebirth of VR. And we saw a lot of things that were very obvious paths that we should take. And then we said, why don't we try the non-obvious path? So we did this very advanced 360 video. We today would probably not even call that VR. We would call it touching the experience of VR, because it did have some interactive triggers. We brought in a very innovative group of 360 filmmakers named Felix and Paul to do that work with us. And it became a viral hit. One of the sort of first things that people really kind of reached out to in the Gear VR and said, this is something that is more than just the sum of its parts. They put real movie stars in it. They put a budget to it. They put time and energy and craftsmanship, which is what movie studios do, into creating something. So that was a hit now 2 years ago. And then last year, we started to say, to your point, can we really start cracking the code in a much bigger, broader way? As the tethered headsets start to emerge, and we're on these early development squads and working with the folks at Valve and HTC and working with all the folks at Oculus. We were very close-knit relationships with them, well beyond business. I mean, we're friends and we stay connected on these things and we try and figure this stuff out. And when the movie The Martian, Ridley Scott was shooting, the book, which I had read and loved, a lot of people read and loved, and there's an interesting viral story around that as a sort of a wonderful piece of media that started out nothing like a book and then became a bestseller from the author Andy Weir. As we started to read that and we started to see the script that Ridley was going to shoot, we felt like this was the perfect next thing for us to tackle. So we went at it and started to build this experience, which turned out to be almost 30 minutes in VR. So it's extremely ambitious. It'll, now that the two tethered systems, the Vive and the Oculus, are now out in its early stages, and the Sony is getting ready to come out in the fall, we're now planning our launch strategy. But we've been showing it at events. So it got shown at CES, it got shown at Sundance, it gets shown at various events for press and people to see it, and it has become a viral hit. You've seen it. We had it at one of your Upload events around GDC, and it creates excitement. People like want to see this because the ambition level is so intense around it.
So what have been some of the biggest takeaways and lessons you've learned as sort of you've pushed into an interactive experience?
Yeah, you and I have talked about this offline a lot, which is one of the things I like to talk about a lot, is the demands of a new medium. And the woman who was just up here before, I thought she was extremely insightful. For those that were sitting in the audience and listening to her, she said a lot of the right things that I think about all the time in my role. Is when you start to look at a medium that is fundamentally different than these kind of screens, these in front of us, and it has new opportunities. And the biggest things that this medium does that is different than flat screen mediums is it's spatial, it has volume, and it has native interactivity. It allows you in a very naturalistic way to move around and interact with story. So we're starting to see cinematic people that have been working in the gaming world and always felt throttled and always felt restricted by the flat screen start to explore what it means to actually be inside something and actually activate around that and build story in that way. And that's what The Martian is as well. It's highly interactive. We take some touches from the past. We have scenes from the movie that play out as kind of the connective tissue. But most of the story is you are playing the part of the astronaut and you are actually doing all the things to get rescued, which is a story in and of itself. It's actually the story that your brain tells in cinema. When you're watching really good cinema, a lot of people that think about cinema understand the reason why we like cinema and we like television is because it's a story that's happening instantaneously in the future. As you watch it, it becomes your story if you engage in it because it's happening, but it's only happening as a window to the world, as a rectangle or a square. When you can crack that code and start to apply a spatial sense of the future of storytelling, that becomes what we refer to as virtual reality, which I think is very different than a 360 look-around experience, which, by the way, I'm super engaged by, too. I like 360 look-around experiences, but I don't think they fully explore the power of the medium. So I often refer to that as kind of when television moved from black and white to color, you saw that it had a new demand on the medium, and when film moved from black and white to color. So there are, of course, still things that happen in black and white. It's an artistic choice, and sometimes you see an Academy Award-winning movie that's done in black and white, but it becomes the edge case. It becomes an artistic choice, whereas the medium demands, and therefore it discovers what it can do. The internet's the same way. As you read things like your site, you embed video into it, and you embed click and touch and move around and make choices differently than you would be looking and thumbing through a magazine because the medium demanded it, allowed it, therefore it demanded it.
The medium is the
VR starts to allow it, therefore it begins to demand it. And those that don't capture all those moments, I think, will be on sort of the wrong side of it, ultimately.
So obviously, I mean, VR and AR allow you to sort of have a different type of storytelling. And I think that it's safe to say it's probably not going to completely replace traditional film and media.
Right.
So how are the two going to coexist in the future in a way that's not just sort of these tie-in experiences for Hollywood?
Yeah. So you make a really interesting and good point about the past tying into the future, and the past never fully gets replaced. We still read books, whether we read them in an electronic medium on a Kindle or a pad or a paper book. We still read magazines. We still consume things. They've just been altered. We still go to Broadway plays, although much less people do. We still go to cinema, although the dynamic of how much people spend their time doing these things is constantly changing, right? So there's an evolution to all that. And we think about different forms of immersive media. So one of the other projects I'm working on is actually an immersive cinema project with a big movie projector company called Barco. It's called Barco Escape. And we sort of bring the idea of let's create these theme park style cinema experiences and bring them all around you. So the next one is the next Star Trek movie. There'll be 50 or so theaters around the world where certain scenes of the movie will explode around you in 3 screens in a normal multiplex. So that's one way to approach the past and the future linking together as opposed to shedding the past.
Yeah.
It actually ties that social experience, the reason we gather in personal space, and that's an important thing. And then as we start to explore and experiment with the social dynamics of AR and VR, I think AR will actually become the order of the day because of its flexibility. You know, we're at an AR conference, but we're mixing VR into the message because they are sort of one and the same thing. It's just a matter of how much of the outside world do you want to occlude and when do you want to get rid of it? What kind of experiences do you want to say, I want 100% black, I want 90 or 80% black, and what kind of experiences do I want to live in a world where I can still see you guys and still do things? And
Yeah.
then what kind of experiences from a productivity standpoint, an education standpoint, a therapeutic standpoint, do I want to really have almost a 50-50 experience where I'm augmenting on top of the real world, that mixed reality experience?
How does bringing in the real world with a sort of an augmented reality thing affect the way that you're able to tell a story? Like, what is different? What will be different about AR storytelling from VR storytelling?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Because again, AR versus VR has a slightly different exploration set, therefore a slightly different demand set. It will start to demand that the best storytellers and the best creatives actually start to figure this stuff out and start thinking about it. So when you say I can add a layer of reality into an augmented world, what kind of stories get created? Well, there's some obvious things, right? In terms of the play space of a living room or a playroom where you're going to gather, or a convention like this where you're going to gather with a bunch of people and then bring up an alien attack, right? Or bring up something that'll float around the world and everybody can look at it. And instead of saying, please look at my PowerPoint or my keynote slides, everybody please put on your augmented wearables and let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me take you to Tahiti and demonstrate what happened when we launched 3,000 fireworks and rockets and what happened, right? Versus let me take you into a fully virtual experience which has a different storytelling demand. But I think they blend together, and I think you're going to find that you know, it's a bit like the reference of mobile gaming versus platform and PC gaming. There's going to be more connective tissue than there is disparate tissue. There's going to be a lot of people that will excel at both and then find their way, that this is what they really like to do, and they're going to do that great. And they feel like closing out the real world is too much of a limiting factor, that they want to include it, and it allows social, and it allows this sort of you know, connected reality to it.
So there's been a lot of experiences that have been created that are on the shorter side, and obviously The Martian kind of pushes the limit of the longer side experience. But we haven't seen yet that sort of blockbuster Hollywood, sort of the Avengers style giant experience. Beyond volume, is there anything else that you think that needs to happen in order for us to get Hollywood to produce those kind of experiences?
Well, we're doing it, right? So at Fox, I think if you look at some of the work that we've been doing and how our stance is, I often refer to what we did is we just dove all the way into the deep end of the pool, got way in over our head, and then are sort of swimming around trying to figure out our way to get to shore versus dipping our toes in the water and sort of wondering, is this going to happen, and kind of going half in and half out. We said, if we're going to do it, let's actually do it. Let's go big and see what we can figure out. So the new projects that we're working on are starting to explore those bigger tasks and bigger goals, to the point as you're sort of pacing with the delivery of the product into the marketplace, right? You don't want to go too early because then not enough people see it and you can't justify the monetization of the budget and the cost and the level of work. You don't want to go too late because then other startups will sort of come in and start to eat your lunch. So we're sort of pacing and gauging that right now. And the next couple of projects we're working on, I think, will be even more ambitious than The Martian, which is, for a lot of people, hard to believe because The Martian is already one of the most ambitious things out there.
How do AR and VR change the distribution model for Hollywood?
Wow, interesting. So if I look at what movie studios excel at, it's making sure that people know where the good stuff is and how to get to it. Part of the challenge with new mediums is it becomes this big boneyard of stuff that people are really looking for curation. They're looking for someone to point them in the right direction and say, this has some real talent behind it. this had some real effort made behind it, and it's not going to be a waste of time. Like, people are always looking at their time versus money versus energy, right? And they put kind of a little ball of okay, this is what I'm going to try and figure out at this moment when I make my entertainment choices. So what a movie studio, and now with Fox, of course, things like Avatar and The Martian and et cetera, and 100 years of movie making, they're good at that. They have a lot of expertise at that. So what we're doing is trying to figure out how to not just deliver a whole shotgun approach of everything out there, but start to find the veins of real interest in the medium, things that really explore what I call the demands of the medium and actually make something wonderful that a nice wide audience would really want to enjoy, and then share it with other people. And we're finding success with The Martian, and I think we're going to find success with other things.
Do you think that there's certain types of things in genres that don't work in VR?
I think poor craftsmanship doesn't work in VR. I don't think there's a particular genre or a particular style of effort or storytelling that doesn't work in VR. But because the medium is starting to find its first commercial viabilities, there are a lot of people dancing around it. And there are a lot of people just trying to figure it out. And I think that's actually admirable. I think you can learn a lot from things that are almost good or are just really, really bad, but have moments of goodness in them. And you're like, you know what? This didn't really work, but there were 3 really interesting things that they tried that I would like to explore in a better, more robust way.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to be very positive about new things. I tend to not sort of put a wet blanket on things, even if I look at it and go, it didn't really do much for me, but maybe it did something for somebody,
Mhm.
right? And what do we learn from that? So I try and make it. I feel like we're in the age of learning. We're not. We shouldn't be in the age of dismissing new technology. We shouldn't be in the age of dismissing new efforts and new ways to try things. We should be open to new things and allow that to happen. And I think the past generation of where we sit with media and how we consume mobile media on tablets and phones and laptops now, and from the generation before that, we consumed them on different types of CRT tubes. Those that just kind of had an open mind ended up finding really good and interesting things.
Mhm. So we've spent a lot of time talking about entertainment here. What are some of the uses that you're most excited about beyond the entertainment sphere for AR and VR?
So for me, there's a huge influence sphere and excitement sphere around education, around socialization, around healthcare, around therapy, and around the unknown, which is actually, I think, the most important thing, right? So all those are very obvious, the ones that I mentioned, and people, they get education, they see how valuable that's going to be. What I like to sort of look at is, when we started the talk, I said, think about the what if.
Mhm.
Think about the new chemistry that a new medium allows, a new creativity allows. What is going to be that thing that gets created by someone in the dark corners of the universe that tried something that was so far out there, and you're like, wow, I never thought that would work, but that is remarkable.
Yeah.
We've seen that many times. We can point to the social networking and how that chemistry, the way that we use Uber and Lyft and things that a new device allowed something new to happen, and someone had to think about different points of view. And I think that this technology has the most powerful point of view of any technology up to date. It's so much more powerful once that power is untapped. So who's going to take those plugs and plug them in a slightly different way? And we're going to say, I can't even imagine what I did before someone did that.
Mhm.
Just like all the things that we could think about now, we could make 20 or 30 references to. I can't even remember the time before I used these kind of productivity tools. The fact that we all have these little robots in our
Right.
pockets that we call smartphones, they are robotic devices. They do everything for us, right? They help us. We rely on them. And it was because someone and many people then started to take on the mantle of, let's experiment with the chemistry of this power and see what we can do. So think about VR and AR even more powerfully as a new brand of chemistry that someone will really tap into. And I hope some of it will be us at 20th Century Fox. That's what I keep my fingers crossed. That's why we keep working every day on it.
Yeah. So we're running low on time, so
Okay.
I've got one last question for you. We spend a lot of time looking sort of in the near term. Let's look far out. Where do you see AR and VR progressing in our lifetime? And do you think that this is the final medium, or is there something beyond it?
Oh, I think there's always something beyond it. I think, I get this question a lot about can you talk about VR in 2020? Well, I like that. That's like tomorrow. Like I see that very clearly. I think a lot of people see that clearly. The headsets are going to get better. They're going to get lighter. They're going to get more nimble. They're going to get much, much higher resolution to the point where that believability structure will become so good that this will be the tool we want to use every day, just like we use our tablets and our laptops and our smartphones. I think AR really is starting to show that promise now, and Fox is making investments in that area, and we're thinking about that, and we're putting our money where our mouth is, or my mouth is. We're saying, we believe in this, we believe in these companies, we're spending time connecting to those companies. Many of them are here at the show. ODG is one of them that we're spending a lot of time with, and I think it's highly valuable what they're doing, and many others that are here to take a look at. But if you look further out, right, let's say 20, 30, 40 years out, the idea of full conceptual immersion, the idea that we can make a choice as to what reality we want to live in and when, I think we are on the cusp of building those worlds right now. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. That's the old, with great power comes great responsibility. There's a dystopian future, there's a utopian future that all ties to that. And I always hope and I always think that humanity finds a way to link with technology in mostly a positive way. It doesn't mean it's always going to be positive, but it tends to find a way. But we are on the cusp of a power accelerator in the visualization tools that we use that will make all this stuff around us look so primitive that we will look at these kind of screens in the fairly near future and think of them as like what black and white television is when our grandparents or great-grandparents at this point lived, and that was their way to entertain themselves. Or going to a movie which was chattering and dancing all around the screen and in a square, and scratches on it and the film would break and so forth and so on. We've evolved past that. I think the evolution tune-up is happening so big right now that everybody in this room that's paying attention is in the right place. You have to be on the edge of experimentation, the edge of what if, the edge of maybe, because doesn't mean we're going to get it all right. We're probably going to get it more wrong than right on the way to right. But if you're on the way to right, you're in the right room, you're talking to the right people, and you're doing the right stuff. So that's what I encourage people to just be bold and take a shot at it. While the shots are really there, while you can really load the gun and really fire with some impact, go ahead and see what happens and see if you land it.
Awesome. Ted Schilowitz, living on the edge of
Living
what
on
if.
the edge.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Will.
you very
Yeah,
much.
of course. Thanks.